Ghana's President Mahama is the fifth most powerful person in the world influencing global development. So Devex, an organization that tracks global development and funding related to global development, have put out their 2026 Power 50 list, a list of the 50 people influencing global development. And number 5 on the list is Ghana's President Mahama. And according to them, Mahama is on the list because his Accra Reset initiative is taking the lead in setting reset agenda for the world, trying to make the world find some path at a time when global development is facing so much uncertainty. I'm going to break down what this list means for President Mahama as I go on with this video. My name is Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about foreign policy and trade from the perspective of an African. And so, if you like intellectual conversations, subscribe to this channel. Now, let's start with what Devex is. And then we will come to the Power 50, and then we will end with how President Mahama got on the list. All right. So Devex, right, is a media institution that focuses on global development. So apart from the general news media like BBC, CNN, TV3, Joy FM that exist around the world, there are also some media houses that focus specifically on specific areas. You know, for example, graphic business, Business and Financial Times. They are media houses or media organizations that focus specifically on business. My YouTube channel, Tony, focuses specifically on foreign policy from Ghana's perspective, right? So Devex is a media organization that focuses on global development. So what they do is they track how organizations like USAID, World Bank, IMF, governments are working towards global development. So the Sustainable Development Goals is very, very important to the work they do, right? And so I'll give you an example. In 2023, they put out a news report that USAID was misappropriating $9.1 billion. And then that was the news report that was used by President Trump and Elon Musk's Doge to, defund USAID when President Trump took office at the beginning of 2025. The work they do is very, very powerful. So, for example, last year they also reported that World Bank is going through some internal politics, which is affecting how they are carrying out the agenda of global development. So, powerful people in the world, really, really powerful people in the world, pay attention to Devex a lot. UN is a subscriber to Devex. Even newspapers like Bloomberg, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Open Foundation, any big organization you can think of in the world, Devex is how they track what is happening in the world, because they don't really care about what BBC is reporting. They don't report the really, really big behind the scene things that are happening in the world. Devex does that. Good. And so every year they put out their Power 50, which is paying attention to powerful 50 people who are influencing the world. And when they say influencing the world, they had what they mean by influence. So they describe power as the ability to influence policies, that means development framework, people, that means the people who execute development framework, and then purse strings, that means where money goes. So the people on the list, they are people who use their power to influence policies, people, and money, right? And so this year, they decided to, when I look at the list, right, the list is trying to tell us something. The list is trying to tell us that in 2026, governments are no longer taking charge of global development. It is specific individuals who are taking charge of global development. For example, they have Mr. Beast on the list. Mr. Beast is the biggest YouTuber in the world. And Mr. Beast is on the list because of his what's the name, charity initiatives. They have celebrity chef Jose Andres on the list. Jose is on the list because of relief initiative. President Mahama, on the other hand, is one of the very few politicians on the list because, according to Devex, he's one of the very few politicians who is using his political power to influence global development. That is why it is a big deal. So let's go to who else is on the list. Let me mention the top 5 before I get to Mahama because it will help us understand what I'm trying to say. Number 1 on the list is Benjamin Black, the CEO of U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. So International Development Finance Corporation, what they do is they decide where U.S. government money goes. Before 2025, U.S. aid used to be the U.S. government's most important arm in influencing where money goes, right? But like I told you before, Elon Musk Doge depressed U.S. aid. So now U.S. aid is no longer as powerful as it used to be. So the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation is now the organization that is leading how President Trump is spending money around the world. Within the U.S., President Trump himself and his government is doing it. But the Benjamin Black is the person influencing how President Trump is spending money around the world. And he's also influencing how U.S. businesses and organizations are spending money around the world. So because the U.S. is the richest country in the world, so the country that spends money outside the U.S. more than any other country in the world, it still is. U.S. is still the most richest country and most powerful country in the world, right? So Benjamin Black, being the person who is deciding how U.S. money is going around the world, makes him the most powerful person in the world. You understand? So he's the one who decides how President Trump spends money outside the U.S. That shows how powerful he is. Number 2 is Sidi Ould Tah. He's the CEO of Africa Development Bank. So again, there is a reduction in global aid. So African governments that used to rely on aid from other countries to develop themselves no longer have the global aid initiative to depend on. So now they have to rely on getting loans for their development. That is where Africa Development Bank comes in. And Africa Development Bank is doing very, very well in helping African countries carry out their research agenda. That is why Sidi is number 2 on the list. Number 3 is Anna Makangu. He is the Vice President of Global Impact at OpenAI. OpenAI is the organization that put out ChatGPT. And AI is influencing how everybody in the world is doing their work. And even on this list, they specifically said AI is influencing health and education. Remember, this organization focuses on development. So because of how impactful AI is in global health and education, Anna Makangu, who is in charge of OpenAI's global impact, she's the vice president of global impact, which means that she's the person who is in charge of how OpenAI is doing around the world, making her the 3rd most powerful person in the world. And then we have Alexander Beja, and then President Alexander Beja is he organized. I think his organization is called Efficient Giving. His job is to make sure that people who are doing charity work around the world give the money in a more efficient way. So think about this. Sometimes there'll be an organization, any organization, say USAID, because I mentioned them earlier, and they are supposed to use $9 billion to help maybe AIDS victims in any country in the world. And then you realize that they are using 6 million out of the 9 million to pay their staff and take planes, and then use only 3 million to do the charity work. What Alexander Bega does is he's making sure that that way of doing charity stops. The money that's supposed to go to people to do the work they're supposed to do is done. And then we have the first politician on the... Benjamin Black is a political appointment anyway, but the first person with real political power on the list is the 5th person on the list, President Mahama. And President Mahama is on the list because of his Accra Reset agenda. I feel like on this channel, because my focus is on foreign policy, I talk about Accra Reset like at least once a week. Sometimes I go maybe, let me say, once every 2 weeks. I talk about Accra Initiative a lot because Accra Initiative is a broad international initiative aimed at fundamentally reworking the global development system beyond the sustainable development goal. So remember when President Mahama was in power, his first term, he was one of the advocates for the sustainable development goal of the UN, and he's supposed to end by 2030. So what President Mahama is doing with Accra Reset now is trying to restructure the world towards how are we going to think about development beyond 2030. And so he started with the Africa Health Sovereignty Summit in 2025. That was in August. And then in September 2025, he launched Accra Reset proper on the back of the Africa Health Sovereignty Summit. Africa Health Sovereignty Summit is very, very important because of this. USAID used to be the organization that financed a lot of health initiatives in Africa. So since President Trump and Elon Musk pulled the plug on USAID, somebody else needs to take up the rank and lead health initiatives in Africa. That is why President Mahama put together the Africa Health Sovereignty Summit. And that is what started the Accra Reset. So President Mahama has become a very, very important voice in Africa when it comes to health care in Africa. These days, he has also added security. Just last week, he had a security summit. I will talk about that summit in another video because there is something about that summit that I paid attention to that I want to ask to talk about in future. So subscribe to my channel if you want to hear my thoughts on that. So Accra Reset started in August, and then it led to President President Mahama officially launching Accra Reset in September 2025. And fun fact, my channel went viral in September 2025. The first story I did on my channel that had more than 10,000 views was me comparing President John Mahama's Accra Reset to President Trump's America First. And it turns out that how I did it was received well by you people, so you started following my channel. I'm really, really grateful to you for that. I'm bringing that up because February 2025 was the first time I started, uploading to YouTube on this channel. So my YouTube channel started officially in February 2025. And within 7 months, I was able to get 1,000 subscribers and 5,000 watch hours, which is what you need to be monetized on YouTube. And that happened because of that one video I did about Accra Reset. So President Mahama's Accra Reset is my personal agenda. I love that reset. There are times I'm going to criticize President Mahama because he's the president of Ghana. So it's not everything that he will do that I will agree with. But Accra Reset, that is my baby. Anyway, so I'm getting emotional talking about that. Because when I started my channel, I didn't think I was going to do so well in so short a time. 7 months is very, very big on YouTube. It takes a lot of YouTube channels years to get monetized. Anyway, so that is what the Accra Reset is about. I've talked about it a few times. And this year, Accra Reset had the convening at Davos just 2 weeks ago or last week. Yeah, Davos was last week. So yes, that is why President Mahama is on the list as the 5th most powerful person in the world in terms of global development. He has started an agenda that is leading the world towards a future where countries like Ghana decide who is in charge of global development or how the world is run. My name is Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics and trade from the perspective of an African. So subscribe to my channel if you like what we do here.